So my question basically is, how would you balance the need to protect a livable environment, which we all care about? How would you balance that with the reality of the cost of regulations coming out of the federal government?
That's a great question. I take it from the way you described it, you're not for it.
I'm just a moderator.
That's a great question. Look, I don't know of any of us who wants to live in a country where the water is poisoned, where the air is unbreathable. There is a role for government regulation. For example, landing gear on the plane, right? The person flying it has a license. But what happens when it goes too far? What happens when they just start making it up? For example, in this instance, this is a law they can't get passed. They can't get it passed through Congress, so they figured out an innovative way to use the agency in the implementation of existing law or in rulemaking authority to instead implement it through a different way. That's what this is an example of. And so one of the things I've called for is a regulatory budget, because regulations cost money. They impose a cost on economy. So you're in an industry, you name the industry, and I regulate you. It will cost you money to comply. You either have to buy a new piece of equipment, you have to hire lawyers, you have to do both. I've proposed a regulatory budget which would cap. It would lower the amount that regulations can cost on our economy, and it would cap how much regulations at the federal level could cost our economy. That's your budget. And so next year, the EPA tries to write a new rule that costs $1 billion to implement and comply. They're going to have to cut $1 billion of regulations somewhere else to get under that capped amount. And what that would do is it would force the cost-benefit analysis. It would, because they're capped, they can't just keep writing regulations without limit. They're budgeted. They would now be forced to undertake a cost-benefit analysis. They would have to weigh the benefit of a new regulation with the costs associated with it. It's not perfect, but it would help limit a lot of this growth and regulation. In fact, it would reduce a lot of existing regulations and limit its future growth. And the second thing is, you do need to have a president that will appoint people to the EPA or to other agencies who don't view it as their mission to do this sort of thing. Because they're an executive branch agency. And what you need is a chief executive and a president that sets the tone. Our job in our agencies is to keep the American people safe, but not to create barriers, not to create obstacles to prosperity. Don't make businesses feel like we don't want you to be in America unless you can overcome all these hurdles and hoops. And here's the last point I would make about how crazy this has gotten. We have now reached the point where there are instances where you cannot get a permit. Because in order to comply with the regulations of this agency, you have to violate the regulations of another agency. So they're in conflict with each other, and they're trying to build a natural gas pipeline in Florida. 6 separate agencies have to review that. And there is a very real possibility that in order to comply with permits from 3 of them, they're going to have to violate the requirements of the other 3. This is how crazy it's gotten. So I think the regulatory budget, in combination with the right executive leadership, brings a lot of this under control.